Welcome to the In-Betwixt and In-Between. This is Leadership Limbo, a podcast aimed at helping middle managers and their supervisors embrace the discomfort and power of leading themselves and others in the midst of it all. We blend real insight with practical tools to help you lead with self-awareness, purpose, and influence, wherever you are on your leadership journey. I'm Josh Hugo, one of your co-hosts, alongside one of my other co-host, the only other co-host, John Clark. Good morning, John. How are you?
One of two. One of one. One of one. Your only co-host. I'm good today. I'm going to continue with the conversation we were just having.
Yeah.
I'm drinking from a mug. Apparently, Josh wonders why I'm drinking from a... Also, got this at the local library. It's called Winter of Reading. That's what it
beautiful.
says. It's beautiful.
It's very pretty.
You get it for filling out like a bingo card or just one row of it. And so I assumed I had met most of the things that I said I had met. And we'll go from there. So got my free mug.
Well, for the
I love drinking from a mug, and I love drinking from a mug. I feel like you were talking a little bit of smack of like, why wouldn't you just drink?
No, I was not. I was not, because the listeners did not see this part, but you have a portable mug next to your other mug, and you poured from one mug into the other. So to be fair, my question was, why aren't you just drinking out of the existing travel mug you have right in front of you? It was just a little elaborate. Little elaborate.
I'm not going to leave in the middle of the podcast to refreshen up my coffee. So I've got to have something here just so I can reach over, you know?
A good mug, I think you hit 40, and a good mug is really important. I have my favorite mug. My dad actually got it for me down in Tucson, Arizona, and you can find them around the West at least, but they're beautiful. I believe they're made out of Mexico, and they're just a really solid ceramic with this sort of like a adobe coloring to them it's just handmade. They're handcrafted. It weighs probably a good 10 ounces, maybe even a pound. And man, I just want to hold that mug. So I get what you're doing. I think I would collect mugs if we had more space for it and it wasn't such a useless endeavor. But I have several ceramic mugs, some made from Salida. True story. You talk about when you turn 40, you want coffee mugs. I've been bringing coffee mugs with me since I was like in my 20s, buddy. So Meg, my wife, said she knew she liked me when I would come to English class like right on time, sit in the front row wearing sweatpants with a coffee mug, not like a thermos, bringing a coffee mug. With a mug.
Carried a mug around. Which actually, my dad, I was thinking about this the other day, he did this. He would bring a coffee mug into his car for some reason. I don't know why he didn't have a thermos or something, but he would bring this. I remember it was kind of weirdly shaped. It had a wide bottom and a narrow top, and he would drink from that. That explains he had an Eagle, which was a car. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
Had leather seats, and there was like coffee stains everywhere. I remember now. So I guess you inherit things like your love of mugs genetically. Yeah. I'm not too sure, but that's
Wow, this went down memory lane fast. Eagle. I haven't heard anyone talk about an Eagle. I think that was an offshoot of the Ford and Mercury company at the time.
Yeah, it was. What was it? Doesn't really matter, but yeah, he had an Eagle. So I like that car.
Wow.
It was fat. It was green. Felt kind of sleek, actually. It was a good car.
Yeah. So. For our listeners who have never heard of it, look it up. You'll chuckle if you are about our age and you remember it, or if you're younger, you're like, I've never heard of that car. It was a generation where a lot of car lines were disappearing.
Not an American Eagle car, so don't confuse it with the store company. It's some sort of Eagle. So
just Eagle.
Yeah. Great. Well, all right, Josh, what do you got for our listeners real quick here?
Yeah. So last week we were talking about presence, and actually, as you're listening to this 2 weeks ago, we were talking about presence, and we wanted to kind of come back to that just briefly as a reminder of the homework we had, which was really thinking about intentional strategies that you may have hooked into that could help you increase presence, not long-term. Like, I think it's a long-term journey to consistently show up with that level of depth and presence, but even a short-term, like low-hanging fruit thing. So maybe speaking last in a meeting, counting the poker chips, for example, of how many times you're speaking. And if you ran out, well, it's time to listen. Priorities that you might decide are things you can wait on, instead of pushing your agenda forward. So lots of strategies we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and just wanted to make sure we're closing the loop. We'll come back to that concept throughout, but we wanted to give you a chance to reflect briefly on that. So extending from that today, John, I think it's all of this has a through line, but we wanted to kind of take things in a slightly different direction. And you've been reading a book that you've consistently brought up to me. I have yet to fully engage in the book. I've read some liner notes about it, but tell us more about the book Multipliers by Liz Wiseman, and kind of where we're going to take our conversation today.
Yeah, I think coming off the conversation with Dr. Brandy Chin last week, and also our conversations recently on influence and presence. I just read this book recently, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it actually seemed like a really good next step. And it's got we're going to go through some terms that I think will really ground this for people about types of leaders you don't want to be, and then thinking about what you want to be in that context. And so the book is called Multipliers. I think it was written in the mid 2010s, maybe 2016 is when it came out. So not a new book. And at the heart of this book is this concept of comparing multipliers to diminishers. Okay, so I want to start with diminishers and what she spends, I would say, most of the book describing as diminishers. And so a few terms that she uses to describe diminishers include empire builders, tyrants, know-it-alls, decision makers, and micromanagers. Now, if you compare that to a multiplier, it's going to be quite different. So, for example, decision makers, if you're a multiplier, you're actually debate makers. Okay, as an example here, and so the idea here is a diminisher has a lot more control. They are a little bit more self-interested, right? Is how this plays out, and because of that, they actually don't grow and get the most from their team, right? And
Mhm.
so a multiplier, as you can tell from the term, uh, is actually their ability to get the most out of their team. They maximize their team's potential to the point that she said statistically, they've actually shown that while it doesn't make sense that it's people will often say that my manager gets like 110% from me, and she and her researchers would push back and say, like, it can't be more than that. We can't give those numbers. But because they were so adamant about it, they were like, I tapped into things I did not know I was able to do because my manager really led me to do that. So they really had this profound sense that I contributed more than I was actually possible of because of the way this person led
Hmm.
me. So
Yeah.
it's a great book. They did a lot of, I think, statistical analysis to actually give data to these ideas that they're talking about. So it's really cool. Now, here's the interesting thing. I think when I went through that list of diminishers, I'm going to bet most of our leaders, especially middle managers, aren't like, I'm the empire builder, hoarding talent and keeping people and being unwilling to like let go of them and allow them to experience new things. I'm not a tyrant. Or at least you know that those aren't good terms,
Right.
right? They don't
Right.
feel good. And so
Right.
what I actually want to talk about is she spends a whole chapter on the idea of something called the accidental diminisher.
Mm.
I think this is something that many people we know, that we have led, that we have coached ourselves for sure, Josh. We're going to get real vulnerable here, can definitely identify with some of these accidental diminisher tendencies.
Mhm.
Okay. So the first thing I want to come back to, because we bring this term up a lot, and I think it's important to ground us again in what it means, is the idea of over functioning as a leader, because so much of what we're going to hear about here are archetypes of people who are over functioning. And so turning it back to you, Josh, because you brought this concept to us, can you talk to us a bit more about what over functioning means as a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. Overfunctioning operates in conjunction with its inverse, which is underfunctioning, and it almost always operates in this dyad. So if there's somebody who is overfunctioning, there's always another person in this relationship that is underfunctioning. So an overfunctioner is taking responsibility away from another person, maybe
Mhm.
unintentionally, maybe subconsciously, but ultimately the motivations behind overfunctioning can vary, but oftentimes it from an outward appearance might look like it is in service of others, but if you were to really examine that, it often is in service of self, right?
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
afraid to let somebody else fail because then it will make me look bad. I'm afraid to see somebody else struggle because I will feel sad that they're having a hard time, right? So often overfunctioning doing more, doing more for others, taking on the responsibility that is not yours to take on is a behavior driven perhaps by good intentions, but ultimately the intentions often rest with your own self, trying to protect yourself from feeling the pain or the challenge of seeing another person struggle with what they're doing. So that's where overfunctioning comes from.
Bingo. I mean, to go back to my favorite clip from the show, quote Josh Hugo, we do too much, right? Like
Yeah,
we do too much.
right.
So it's that exact idea that if we can hopefully get, people listening to this who are middle managers, especially, you have to really prevent yourself from doing too much, which just does not mean, it doesn't mean you're not doing enough. It just means, remember, you are a catalyst. You are empowering people. You are not, you want to shy away as much as possible from just being the doer, right?
Yes.
And so,
And John,
yeah,
let
go
me
on.
just add one piece of that too, is this particular posture of overfunctioning or underfunctioning.
Yep.
And as you're about to go through these different tendencies, it's really important to think of this as a listener in the context of moments when things are going a little less than perfect, right?
Mhm.
In
Mhm.
moments of pressure, in moments of tension, in moments of anxiety, because a lot of us might hear this and say, oh, I really do want to trust other people. I don't always operate like this. The challenge of this kind of overfunctioning posture and this diminishment posture is not when things are going smoothly, although it may happen then too, but it's really to challenge yourself to say, when things are not going so well, when the pressure is on, am I accidentally slipping into these different postures? So really think about the context of this next part under a scenario where things are not so great and you're feeling that strain. So that's
Yeah,
the last thing I would add is that posture is that's when this posture really shows up.
totally. So what I want to do is we want to get into these 9 different ones, and we won't do a super deep dive on anyone. I'll read them. We'll give a quick reaction. I think one's, Josh, where we align the most. I'd like us to share that and maybe give an example, but we won't give an example for each one. If you're watching on YouTube, I am going to show an image that, if I can get it going, it won't let me share, so I'm not going to share. But I was going to share an image here. I would recommend people go to the wisemangroup.com. That's Liz Wiseman's website, which will have all this stuff. There's actually a free, I believe, a free assessment you can take to see if you're one of these accidental diminishers. Although many of you, I think listeners are going to you're going to know right away which one you are. So we'll go with the first one. And this one we've talked about actually a lot when we talked about rescuer, hero, victim, those sort of things. This is the rescuer. Okay. So they step in to save people and they make them dependent. Josh talked a lot about this, but, kind of help us understand that one a little bit better, what this looks like, why people do it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to go too much into depth, but yeah, rescuing is just stepping in to save another person, making them dependent upon you,
Yeah.
right? So if there is a rescuer, there's a victim, right? And again, that's that over under functioning dynamic explicitly. So if you're coming in to save another person, over time, you're essentially cutting out their legs from underneath them. And they start to, you'll know the signs of this relationship existing when somebody is always seeking approval from you, always coming to you with questions. If you're a founder on a team, for example, if you're a leader who feels like everyone is always coming to you, that's your problem to solve because there's a good chance that you are the rescuer, you are the overfunctioner, and if that signal continues to show up in your world, the volume, the over volume of concerns coming your way, there's a good chance that it's because you've created a dynamic where you are the rescuer for your team, and they unfortunately and perhaps unintentionally are seeing themselves as victims of the dynamics around them.
For sure. And I think I'd push people too. I think it's easy to look at this one and say, oh, I just don't like to see people suffer. I don't want to, you know, I don't, I want to protect them. And I would push this. I think people are going to make the most change when they realize that part of this is you might want them to be dependent on you,
Yeah.
frankly.
And
And because that sounds manipulative, but I think the more that you begin to coat these in probably some of the subconscious stuff they are, the more likely you are to get past that tendency as well. Because it's
yeah,
easy to say, like, well, I'm just protecting people. They like me. That's why they like me as a leader, because I step in for when they need it and I don't let them suffer. I'm here to end that for them. I think if you look at it more of like, no, I think you are creating dependency because you like that. That can be one. So
yeah,
um,
yeah. People learn
next,
from pain. People do learn from pain, and that
I do.
helps them to
Yep.
create their own sense of agency.
Yeah. Pain and challenge is part of it. So, uh, actually, I like that for a second. I actually think as a manager, that's a really important thing to note is that part of what you do is you allow enough pain and challenge and difficulty to enter your team that like they have to create movement from that. And so if you protect people from that, there can't be growth, right? There just can't be for you or for anyone. All right, so the next one is the idea fountain or the ideas guy, as she puts it as well. This is the constant flow of ideas that overwhelms the team. You're constantly coming in and like team, you come in first thing in the morning. I've got a new idea for us. I know how
Yeah.
we're going to solve this problem. Here's this thing, and you're just yammering and going, and then you run out of the room, and the team's like, "Whoa, okay."
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, talk to us, and that gets a little bit into another one here in a minute, which we'll talk about, but this
Yeah.
idea of being the idea fountain, Josh, talk to us about that, why this
Yeah.
is a
I mean,
problem.
I'm seeing this for the first time in this concept, but it's me oftentimes when I'm less intentional. And John knows this. Like, I have a million ideas. I'm often kind of sitting in a space of too many of them. Some of it stems from like a true desire to always try to do something different and innovate, and I don't get too fixated on one thing. And on the other hand, it's like if I give you so many ideas that exist, I can't and I won't have to sit with the fact that none of them may work because that would mean embracing potential failure or rejection of an idea. It's like coming from a place of anxiety of,
Mhm.
oh, I have so many things that we could do, um, like showing and trying to prove my worth, that insecurity or that self-preservation tendency shows up in this. So it's both sides. It's all sides. It's not just like it's not purely out of a place of insecurity. Some of it is out of a desire to innovate and create, but some of it is also out of that less functional side. So definitely resonates with me.
Yeah, and so part of this too is, I think to that point, this isn't so much about saying for people who fall into this, it's likely because you're a creative type and that's how your brain works. So it's not so much of saying like shut that off and stop having ideas or your ideas are bad. It is how do you hold those for a bit? Like how do you create? And one of the strategies she talks about is you create a holding tank, right? So before you share ideas, you stop and ask yourself if you want people who work for you to take action now. If not, hold off sharing and save it for later because some of the things that can happen from this are twofold. One, everybody hears a new idea and they think, oh, we got to start operating on executing on that now.
Yeah.
And then that's where you get teams that say we have 15 priorities and the new shiny object of the week. The second thing it does is it'll stop your team from thinking. It'll stop them from generating ideas because
Right.
they'll think, well, I know that
What are
Josh or
you going to
John
do?
or
Yeah.
whoever is going to come up with the idea so I can just sit back and wait. It was
Uh-huh.
actually, I talked to a guy about this last week. We were talking about, are you a leader or an operator executioner? And he said, I'm a leader. And I said, why? He's like, because my people, when I have an idea and we want to execute it and I tell them they're willing to do it. I said, well, you sound like an operator or like you come up with the ideas, but that isn't leading because you're not generating other people. You're not creating other people to think of new ideas, right? Or to do
You're
the
not
thinking.
multiplying. Yeah.
So if you are this big ideas creative person, certainly don't want you to like put a like, to hide that. You just got to find the right way to let that out, know when the right moment is, and also ensure that that's not preventing other people from having ideas and having their voice in it as well. Right.
Yeah, and one thought came to mind briefly on this one too, is for an idea person, this concept of provisional plan and promise is really helpful to let your team know
Mhm.
where you stand with an idea to say, hey, team, this is very provisional. I don't want you to act on it. Or hey, team, this is the plan. Like we're likely to be doing this. This is what we're moving on. Or hey, this is promise. Like we are doing this and trying to categorize the ideas you have under provisional or a plan or a promise
There you go.
super helpful, and I found myself needing to say that more because to your point, John, some people hear what I say as a leader and they're like, "Okay, Josh, I spent the last 15 hours since yesterday putting this plan together for this big event we're going to do." And you're like, "Oh, that was just an idea." And they're like, "Are you serious?" And
Yeah.
so the idea of articulating where your idea stands in its stage of finality or non-finality is a really helpful tool for the idea fountain person.
Yep. Cool. Our third one here, rapid responder. And in the words of Taylor Smith, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. So this is me is a rapid responder.
Yeah, tell
A
us more.
little bit different. Did you like my lead in there? Uh,
Yeah.
Taylor Swift.
I've watched a few Taylor Swift things. I like her,
It's
but you
better
know
than that garbage you sent me the other day, but nevertheless, so Josh sent me some weird thing with guys in costumes playing like electrical instruments. It freaks me out.
yeah, we'll
But
leave that in the comments for our The kids aren't ready for it yet, rock and roll.
Back to this rapid responder. So this is someone who responds instantly to things, and they remove ownership from others. So probably the easiest way to see this on a pretty low level, but happens all the time, and I'm familiar with this, is emails come through. You are working on a project. You're crafting together this like really thoughtful response about, hey, this is how we're moving forward with this. You're telling the client something, and you're about to hit send, and all of a sudden your manager comes in, swoops in, and they've already sent something pretty quick to share what's going to happen. So you're now feeling defeated. You're feeling, well, why did they feel like they had to respond and they didn't give me the time to do it? And so you as a person are just feeling this need to communicate all the time.
Mhm.
And you take that on so that we don't miss a beat because you're too anxious about the idea of what happens if we don't respond to this person as soon as possible. And so rather than working with your team to allow them ownership and allow their voice to be heard, you take over, right? Um, I I would say this is me because it's a tendency of mine. I became aware of it enough that I would at least ask someone like, "Hey, did you see that email? Are you gonna respond?" And sometimes they didn't like that because it was like, "John, yeah, I saw it. Give me 15 minutes to get to it." But it was still better than just like automatically responding,
Yeah.
right? And I had to teach myself to sit back on emails, wait on things. But you can do it in a variety. It doesn't have to just be email, right?
Teams
It's
messages too.
Teams
Wait
messages,
5
Slack
minutes, and
messages.
90% of the time, the other person
Yep.
solved their own problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you just want to keep the organization moving fast. You want to move forward. You don't want things to get delayed, but you end up creating traffic jams, too many decisions or changes. And so what can you do here? I mean, you just need to set a mandatory waiting period, wait 24 hours to respond to things. Like I said, you can ask someone else about it before you go into it, make sure they're ready to respond and feeling confident about it too. So other thoughts on rapid responder before the next one, Josh? All right, the optimist. You create belief. Your intention is to create a belief that the team can do it, right?
Yeah.
That's your intention. You're like, hey, we can do this.
Yeah.
These are challenging times. We can do it. And the problem is that you sometimes create this is where toxic positivity becomes a real thing. I'm not a lover of that term. I think that's just a way of people hiding from like it's okay to be optimistic. But if you're overly optimistic and you don't also note to your team like, hey, we are in the midst of a challenge. This is tough and we can make our way through it. I believe in us. Then people begin to think, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Why does that why does my leader, why doesn't John, why doesn't Josh see how hard this is? Why don't they understand? Right.
Right.
Um, and so when you don't name that,
Yeah.
when you don't share in the challenge of it, then people begin to feel like there's something wrong with them, and they hide a little bit. Right? Thoughts on
Yeah.
that, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is true, and I think people can feel disconnected, and like the leader is disconnected and aloof. Like, does he
Hmm.
not have a clue? Does she not have a clue of how it actually is on the ground? And it's a trust breaker. I think that it's important to be realistic with the team. It's like that Stockdale paradox. This idea of being able to sit in the discomfort of reality without completely giving up hope, but also not believing that it's going to be magically better tomorrow. I think the best leaders can sit in that middle ground. And yeah, I don't have much more to add. I think that's really it's a tendency of a lot of people in I think certain industries, and especially in the nonprofit space where everything is very mission oriented, is it's almost inexcusable sometimes to believe that you might say this is worse than we thought because it feels like you're giving up on the people you're there to support. But at the same rate, everyone already knows it's hard, so
Yeah.
stop pretending that it's easy.
No, I think, and that's the big thing. As long as you can acknowledge, hey, what we're being asked to do is difficult, and we may not fully succeed, or we might have some failure, and I still believe we can move forward. Is a lot different than just like we got this. This is easy. I know how to do this. Let's go. And people are like, I don't think you get it. So yeah, totally agree. The next one's not too far off from Idea Fountain, although I think we can see some key differences here is the strategist, right? So this
Mhm.
is the person that gives the answer rather than asking the question. So how I would differentiate this personally from the Idea Fountain is the Idea Fountain is just this bubbly, enthusiastic person that comes in and they're just spewing new thoughts and new ideas and new innovations out all over the place. Certainly can probably lend into strategist, but strategist is, I know the answer. Here's what we're going to do.
Mhm.
You don't partake in debate, you don't solicit ideas, you don't let other people create the strategy, you create the strategy, right? And then
Mhm.
you just ask them to execute it. That is probably closer to what the guy I was talking about earlier was a strategist. He said, "Okay, I know the thing we're going to do. I know how to do it. Now you go execute." And so what yeah, talk about that, Josh. Talk about some of the downfalls and negative
Yeah.
aspects of that.
It's a hard one, right? Like, especially if you're in a position of, managers, I think often sit in a space where they've been promoted to that role because they were really good at the implementation
Yes.
of strategy before. So it's easy to say, and it may even be true that you know more than the people that you're leading, or at least you know more about the project or the strategy that you're trying to execute. So it's easy to fall trap to that bias of like, well, I want to be able to make sure they all know how to do this. And I fall trap to this too, when after 10 plus years in the previous role I had, I would be constantly working with new and early career folks. So it was very easy to kind of have them look to me to say, all right, well, what's the strategy? And if I was accidental and I felt like, oh, that's kind of a nice little nudge to my ego to say, oh, yeah, I know what to do here. So here's what we do. It ultimately limits innovation. Now, it doesn't mean that you flip it back to people all the time and say, well, what do you think we should do? Like there's a balance between being directive, being clear on a strategy and a plan, and also being collaborative. And I don't think we need to go down that tangent too much in this podcast today. But I do think that if you're consistently just telling people what to do, you are not multiplying others, right? You are essentially just having them replicate the existing practice. So where do you find that space to engage with a little more curiosity or to say, this is how we've done it before, but I do think there's room for improvement. Like, I'm going to flip it back to our team here and say, like, these are 3 or 4 points we've had in the past that didn't go perfectly. What could we do to improve that? Is a way to balance like having an overarching strategy that works with still getting input and giving voice to members of your team to add some color or add some variety to the way in which it's been done before.
Yeah, and I think a big thing is you can message the why, you can message the what, but this is where you give challenge to folks to figure out the how, right?
I like that.
You can say why we do that, what's the outcome we're looking for. That still sets the vision, that still sets the bar of excellence that you need, but you empower others to create the how under these circumstances, and you're still leading well. I would also think if you're in a spot where that you're saying, well, I have to create the strategy for everything as I have to make it sure it goes well. I don't think you're being thoughtful enough. There are some things that maybe you determine this is high risk enough, this is high stakes enough that I need to be in on the generation of the strategy, but that can't be everything your team is doing every day. And so there are certain things you want to let go and you want to give more extreme ownership to others to create, which actually is going to lead us into I'm going to skip one that's on our list and go back to it, but this idea of the perfectionist is the
Mhm.
next one, right? And I actually think this feeds into that a little bit, but
Does.
you set a standard, but it actually ends up discouraging others. And so your intention here is to help produce outstanding work that people are proud of. The problem becomes that people feel criticized, they become disheartened, and they stop trying. Okay. I'm going to turn it to you in a second, Josh. But one of the ways that she puts this in her book is that when you're a perfectionist, and you want something that like 100% meets the standard or at least meets your standard, you'll come into a project and you'll nitpick, you'll change things, you'll oversee, you'll micromanage to get it the way that you think is right, to get it perfect. And what happens is you get a project that's like 100% to your liking, but you only gave like 60% of the ownership to that person rather than something where that person had 100% of the responsibility and maybe got it 90% of the way there. And so maybe it's not at 100%, but at least it was fully owned by them. And that's going to help them to produce better in the future. And so sometimes perfectionists have to sit in the discomfort that, hey, 90% on this is good enough. 85% on this is good enough for the risk of this person having the opportunity to fully own it.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
No, that's a really great point. I think it goes back to the idea of multiplying. Perfectionists need to pause and ask themselves, if I truly want to just be a perfectionist without having to worry about other people, then stop being a leader. Like just
Hmm.
don't be a manager.
Totally.
Don't be a leader. Just be an individual contributor. Go write your own blog, try to do something on your own because the fact is your perfectionism is shutting down other people's ability to grow. And frankly, it's making your job as a manager harder because I've worked for perfectionists before. And what you stop doing is you stop going, you stop taking any ownership because you're like, it doesn't matter. what I
Yeah.
do on this project? Why would I spend 2 hours building this idea to bring it to this person only for them to say, "Hey, that was great, but I'm gonna do it the way that I wanna do it?" So you really end up making your life harder if you're a perfectionistic leader. It doesn't mean that you don't have a high bar, but there's a difference between having a high bar and saying it really like what I'm doing is just getting like helpful input from others, but I'm still ultimately going to be the one to tell you what it is. It's an like perfectionist leaders can very quickly burn out teams and create highly unhealthy cultures very fast. And it's tricky because here's the thing I often, and I know plenty of perfectionists in my life, but perfectionists often like almost pat themselves on the back of like, yeah, I'm kind of a perfectionist. That's not a good thing. It's
Right.
not a good thing. And sometimes we kind of hide that perfectionism with like, well, perfect is pretty good. And so I say it and I kind of take mild accountability of my perfectionism, but really it's not accountability. It's really just admitting that you have this challenge and you're not really doing much to address it. You have to be addressing this if this is how you operate because it will absolutely affect the morale and the productivity of your team.
Yeah, and I mean, like all these, ends up becoming more about you and what you think you know versus actually trying to support the other person or get the project right. So, we got three more here. So the next one is protector, and this is the person that shields their people to the point of limiting growth. So, a couple classic lines from this of, well, management's making us do this, or like executive leadership's making us do this. I'm not going to make us do that, team, or this is dog poop. I don't know if we can how much we can curse on here, but I don't like
4
this, and we're not going
times.
to do it.
Yes, FCC
Or
says 4 times. That's I made
or
that up.
you, um, essentially you hide your team from the challenges. Like maybe you don't admit the difficulties. Oh, we're having a budget shortfall, so I don't talk to us about that. I'm going to cut it in other ways that they don't notice, whatever it might be. There's all sorts of things that you're the protector and you actually don't allow people to see the challenges that they're facing, whether it's kind of external or internal in the company.
Yeah. I don't have much to add to that. It's slightly adjacent to rescuer, but rescuer is almost like once people have started something and it's not going well, you jump in. Protector is almost not even getting people started on something and kind of preemptively preventing people from having to do something that might actually be in
Yeah.
their best interest to grow.
And not even, well, it can be do something. It also just can be from the reality of a situation. Like you're
Mhm.
not giving them the full understanding of difficulty,
True.
or
Yeah. Information
there's or
withholding.
something harms their project and they're like, I can't believe this. And instead of saying, hey, you're gonna have to work through that, like you're gonna have to figure it out as the leader, you would say, you know what, that's fine, I get that, let's drop this because there's nothing you can do about that. Whereas leaders have to learn how to absorb the challenges that come with their work, right? So pace setter, this person sets a breakneck pace, leaving others behind. Like you're just so like, we're gonna get this done, and you kind of think, I'm gonna lead the way, I'm going to set the pace, and you know what's going to happen? People are going to rise to the occasion and they're going to follow me. And it doesn't
Mhm.
work that way. She gives a great example of when she races her little boy, her 6-year-old. This reminded me of Ian, to the bus stop in the morning. And sometimes her competitive spirit gets the best of her. And she not only like beats him by a little bit, but she like blows him out of the water. And when she looks back, he's actually like head down, you know, Charlie Brown, like walking. And she's like, "What's wrong, buddy?" He's like, "I don't want to race anymore," because he's like, "What's the point? I'm not even close to you. You didn't even like." It's one thing for her to win, it's another for her to just like blow him out and embarrass him, right? If she
Yeah.
had made it so that he at least wants to try to stay close to her, he would. But that's how your employees feel when you're going at such a pace because of your experience or your ability, or the project well, but they can't keep up. They feel defeated. Like it's one thing to set a good pace that people are, challenged to keep up with. It's another one to say, I can't even keep up with you. Right.
Yeah. And what are
So
you trying to prove with that, right? Again, it
mhm.
goes back to like almost sending a bit of a message or proving to yourself like I'm as fast as I used to be or,
Can beat a 6-year-old.
yeah, beating a 6-year-old. God, what a story. I have that image.
Right.
All right, last
Yeah.
one. Let's do it.
Yeah, always on, over communicates, occupying too much space. They're just, man, they come in, we talked about presence, right? So it's kind of a good one to end on. And this is that type of presence that, like, when people hear presence, this is sometimes what they think about: the exuberant, ebullient, just like wild, like in your face, let's go. Yeah, this is great. Like energy, energy, energy. But doesn't always create the infectious energy that you think it's going to create. You can kind of consume space and and others will tune you out. Talk to us
Mhm.
about that, Josh.
Yeah, I think that idea of taking up too much space goes right back to the way we started with the idea of multiplying others. That requires that you're giving people room to grow. And if you've just taken over the space and there's only so much space available, where are others fitting in? If you're kind of that like life of the party, that sort of, when that person enters the room, again, these are tendencies that you might have. They're not necessarily, we're not sitting here like casting blame or fault on you or ourselves, but it's an awareness piece. And if that's how you operate, put yourself on the other side of the table and say, well, does this person feel like they have room to grow? Or am I just kind of like a charismatic leader who, it's really about me again. And the always on is also a burnout tendency, right? If you're always just, the 10 p.m. emails, the 5 a.m., Teams messages nonstop, it's not modeling a healthy balance that is an important way to sustain the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and she kind of sets the idea of try just saying it once as an example to this person. You might have something that excites you and you're just like constantly talking about it. Say it once, let it sit, let the team wrestle with it a bit and go from there. But lots of different ideas here. So we'll put a link to the website in this because you can just through the website see a lot of good resources here.
Yeah,
Highly
super
recommend the
helpful.
book, but want to do for homework here, want to encourage our readers to think about which of these accidental diminishers are you? Which one are you? And if that's the only thing you do for the homework, just sit with that. But if you want to go beyond that, see how it's showing up for you. Ask yourself how it's showing up for you and put some strategies in place to reduce that, right? Again, these come from often good intentions. And so the idea of like pulling back on that to actually grow your team versus protecting your team is really key.
What do they
Um,
say? Is the highway to hell is paved with good
yep,
intentions. So
that's right.
it's okay
Yeah.
to accept it, but then you
Yeah.
got to do something
I'm
about it.
on a highway to hell with good intention. Last thoughts before I close this out here, Josh.
Let's close it out.
Sweet. Please subscribe, download, leave a 5-star review, leave some comments, email us, text us, send a carrier pigeon. We don't really care. Let us know what you think about what we're doing, what you're taking away from it, examples that maybe we can add to our show here and share good examples for people of how they're utilizing this stuff. So glad to be on this journey with you. Until next time, this has been Leadership Limbo, where we make space for the tension and tools for the journey. See you in the in-between.